Okay, so in this video, we're going to just learn some of the basics of understanding supply and more specifically the law of supply. So when we're considering the law of supply, we do need to take into consideration what is supply. So we think of the law of supply, so we understand that the producers, those who make the products, are going to supply more of a product when the price increases. And of course, then less as it falls. Because what is the guiding factor? Money. So when we look at the quantity supplied, it is basically the actual specific amount that the producer is willing and able to sell at the specific price. So for every price, you have a quantity supplied, a value that is designated for that price. So when we think about the law of supply, we have to kind of change gears because we have to think about producers and we have to look at their choices. And this is considered and develops from current and new producers. And we will discuss how new producers come into the determination of quantity supplied in just a second. So basically, it all comes down, of course, to the idea of earning additional revenue, and that when you see a price of a good rise, well, existing firms want to continue to produce more, and then you have that there's added incentive for new firms to enter into the marketplace and try to get their own money. So this is the illustration of the law of supply. As you can see, both arrows are going in the same direction. They're both going up. So the graph is in a more positive slope where both quantities are increasing. So of course your scale over here, say it's like 5 up here, 1 down here, we have 1 and 5. Of course, it also can decrease if price goes down, quantity supplied goes down. So when we think back on the law of demand, we see a much different illustration. When the price goes up, the demand goes down. And we learned that this was an indirect relationship. So we look at higher production and kind of where this law of supply comes from. We have to remember ceteris paribus or ceteris paribus if you are a more Latin influenced individual. I am not, so we call it ceteris paribus. Or just think you're Harry Potter in a wand and just say however you think Harry Potter would. That means when there is literally no external factors being in consideration in this, in our deciding quantity supplied, then we know that when it is driven by the price of a good, there's incentive. A firm is already earning a profit, so of course you increase the price, then it's just logic to assume that they will earn more if they produce more at higher prices. So the search for profit is what really drives the decision for increasing production when a price increases. Now, what's really important to understand is that that's literally not always going to be the case. So we're going to come and we're going to review why ceteris paribus is not always going to be the constant, basically, within the supply industry. But in a perfect world, nothing else would be considered except for price and quantity supplied. So when we think about the new producers entering the market and how the price increase can make way for market entry, you got to think about the idea that now more people or individuals are driven by price, and my red marker doesn't show from this. So you think about past examples when disco became the thing. You got John Travolta doing his thing on Saturday Night Fever. You got some Bee Gees, Staying Alive. You got whatever. Everybody wanted platform shoes. Everyone wanted bell bottoms. It was the thing. So as everyone was willing to pay a lot of prices for disco memorabilia, then more people wanted to offer it. Grunge. Oh my gosh, the selling of flannels. Every store was carrying flannels. So when we start looking at supply and understanding the price and the quantity supplied correlation, this is a supply schedule. So remember, a schedule is basically a table, and you have for a price, you have a specific quantity supplied that is going to be willing to be supplied at that price. And as you can see, as the price goes down, so does the quantity supplied per week. And that is because the lower the price, the less willing and able a producer is to supply a particular good, in this case, pizza. So I just want to also remind you, when we think about this as coordinates on a graph, your price is going to be your y-axis, and your quantity supplied is going to be your x-axis. So we put this into a coordinate form. When you put x, comma, y, you're going to have 28, comma, 15, and 24, comma, 12. This data table is literally telling you the coordinates to graph a supply curve. When we think about demand, we think about, well, the price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. Correlation. So when we think about an actual graph of a demand curve where we have quantity demanded and price, the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded. The lower the price, say this is a $1, this is $5, this is 1, and this is 5. The price is $1. Our graph is at a negative slope with an indirect relationship, and I just finished that. Oh, okay. So it is an indirect or otherwise known as a negative correlation. Whereas when we think about now our understanding of the law of supply, price goes up, quantity supplied goes up. And here it is illustrated in a supply curve. And as you see, we have our y coordinate 15, and we had 28 million per week. And we have down here our $3 with 12 million per week. And we have that there is the cheaper the price, the smaller the quantity supplied. So it is more of a positive slope and completely opposite from the demand. And it goes in more of a positive direction. So when we then look at that idea of the negative, we put that slope curve that we were drawing on the previous. If this was a demand schedule for pizza, it would be like this, in the negative opposite direction. So why are they different? We think of this idea why, we have to think of who is taking in consideration and what they're driven by. So when you're thinking about demand, it is driven by the consumer, people like you. You want to save money. But in supply, it's driven by the producer, which is the person who makes the product. And they are also driven by money, but in a different way. As we're making all of these correlations between supply and demand, we also have to look at some very similar things that are in supply. So just like demand, supply has elasticity too. And so we have to think of the fact that there is going to be a measured response by firms to the changes in price. It's either going to be elastic, which remember that's stretchy. It's like a hair tie. So that means it's very sensitive to price. But if it's inelastic, it means the supply is not very responsive to changes in prices, and that means there's not a lot of flexibility, and the supply will either grow or shrink in response to the price itself. And of course, you do have unitary, which is the equal to 1. It's perfectly matched. Very rarely do you have a perfectly matched situation. So when we think about the producers, though, you have to think about a very important concept. When you go to the store and you're going to buy something and you're going to spend money, but you see that the price is too high, well, you're going to quickly put your wallet away and you're going to make the decision, is that a necessary item or a luxury? Do I need it or do I not? Is there a cheaper substitute? And you're going to make that decision quickly. But a producer, can they easily just slap a button in a factory and then walk away and like all cartoon-like, everything just stops and they're just, okay, we'll come back to this when we need supply again? Are they just going to push that button and then all of a sudden things start popping out of the factory just like they do in cartoons? Not so easy. So the biggest factor in the supply, elasticity of supply, is time. It's not so easy for producers and firms to just stop or all of a sudden speed up production. If a firm decides that they want to put more shoes into the market, but they're already producing at max capacity in one factory, well, don't they need to build another factory to continue to produce higher volumes of shoes? Well, yeah, I'm sorry, but the last time I checked, factories didn't just build themselves overnight. There's no snapping of fingers, waving of wands. It's just not possible. So there needs to be time. They need to buy land. They need to put the factory together, fill it with capital. They need to get labor. And there it is, your 3 factors of production, right? They need to collect them. They're going to need land, they're going to need labor, and they're going to need capital. And it's going to need time. So, output level in the short run, not so elastic, and is considered inelastic in the short run. But as time allows for a firm to make adjustments to their production levels, they are able to respond. So then it becomes more elastic over time. Land, of course, being one of the biggest things. This is the hardest thing to acquire in the particular factors of production. So as we take that into consideration and we look at the perfect world in which a producer or firm wants to make money, it's important to consider that higher the price, the more that's going to be supplied.